How's it going, folks? So, with the recent mass killings that have happened, there's been a massive reaction among, quite frankly, some very sick individuals. They've tried to exploit these events for their own personal political gain or to push their own agenda. And quite frankly, I'm getting pretty fed up with this. So, I'm going to be going down and responding to this, and I'm going to be going topic by topic. So this is probably going to be a longer video. I'm probably going to record this in segments and go on it topic by topic. Well, let's start off with some of the reactions certain figures have made. I know in the previous video I discussed Francis's reaction. Suffice to say, his reaction was totally inappropriate, and if by now you guys cannot see that this person always tries to make everything about themselves because they're that self-centered of a person, then I don't know what will make you see that. Quite frankly, it's alarming that that guy came close to Ted Cruz in the 2018 election here in Texas. So, next one. Apparently, Ethan Klein had made a statement about bombing an NRA convention that's coming to Texas. Now, let's stop and think about this a second. I want you to imagine for 1 second somebody on my side of the aisle said something like, well, I hope somebody finally offs Schumer. What do you think the reaction would be to that? So, my question is, how on earth do people like Ethan Klein get a pass when it comes to stuff like that? I mean, had somebody like me said, I hope somebody picks off Charles Schumer, well, the video would be taken down from YouTube, probably, and I would probably get a visit from law enforcement over a statement like that. So why does it seem like you get people like Ethan Klein and several other people who get away with making statements such as that? Seems an awful lot like there's a double standard going on here. And quite frankly, I'm getting kind of tired of it. So, moving on. Now, when these things happen, there's always a crowd of people who always jump out to say, we need another gun law. Well, some of these events happened in places like New York, where they have just about every gun law you can imagine on the books. And their reaction is, well, we need another gun law there. Yeah, maybe gun laws are not doing anything to stop this. It is the wrong focus. This diverts attention away from the real problems that we are facing. I'm going to start off with the common defense of New York style gun control in New York, and and Chicago style gun control in Chicago, because the gun controllers always like to claim that, well, it's not New York and Chicago's fault, it's all these other states, that have lax gun laws. I'm reminded of a child who does something really stupid, looks really stupid, and then cries, well, if everyone else had done this very same thing, I wouldn't look so stupid. So now, New York, by the way, is talking about expanding their red flag laws even more, reducing the evidence so much so to being probable cause. They want to make it so if there's even so much as probable cause, they can indefinitely make you a prohibited person, take your property, and not give it back to you. Does that sound like a free and just nation to you? Doesn't sound like that to me at all. So, with that being said, there are going to be those of us who are focusing on defending a freedom we value. And it's unfortunate that we have to focus so much attention to that. And for those of you all saying, well, why don't you just work to find a solution and, don't worry about defending your freedom just yet. We have to protect those children. Well, let me put it to you this way. Imagine if a homosexual person got caught molesting a bunch of children and there was a massive push against homosexuality in this country. Do you expect the homosexual community to just lay down if that push is now exploiting that event to further restrict homosexuality, to put further restrictions on homosexuals? I wouldn't. I would expect them to stand up for themselves and their community. I mean, it's unfortunate that children got molested by this one fucking pedo, but the fact of the matter is that there are priorities. I mean, you got to prioritize protecting yourself and your own values before you can help anybody else. And what we really should be focusing on is, why is this particular group of people exploiting this event to push their own agenda? That to me seems like the people who are the ones wasting everyone's time and wasting everyone's effort, not the people who are defending a freedom that they value, a culture that they value, against, quite frankly, very manipulative people who have no business with any sort of power or influence whatsoever. And that goes true to every single politician who claims the Second Amendment is about things like deer hunting. Our founders did not get through with a massive deer hunt and say, wow, this was fun. Let's make sure we codify protection on this into law. It was about something else. The Second Amendment was specifically about arms. Nobody in their right mind would say Jim the duck hunter was bearing arms in the 20 years he was hunting ducks. He was carrying a bit of sporting equipment. Much like a camper would carry a tent stakes, and a mallet to drive them into the ground to go camping. That's what Jim's shotgun boils down to being at that point. Sure, you can use Jim's shotgun to murder people, but you can use that mallet and those tent stakes to murder people too. My side of the aisle has been able to explain what a well-regulated militia means to these gun controllers, whether or not they want to acknowledge it. In fact, they refuse quite so often to acknowledge it. The gun controllers, however, cannot explain what the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed means. Yes, my side's been consistent. Their side has not. And the fact of the matter is, they don't like the Second Amendment. They don't like the fact that it prohibits their agenda. Full stop. Yes, in the days of the Second Amendment of our founding, people had cannons. In fact, you can still buy those cannons today. And guess what? You can have them shipped to your home. You can be a felon and own them. There's an exemption, with black powder firearms and armaments that get them treated pretty much as antiques. And so anyone can buy them. But yes, in the day of our founders, people had their own private warships, even. So, why on earth do you think the Second Amendment would prohibit, uh, I should say, not protect the right of the people to, say, have an AR-15? Or even some of the stuff they cannot legally get, that's not readily available to the general population, such as, say, an M16A2 or an M16A4 or an M4A1 or an M240 or 249. Hint, it does protect people who wish to be able to own such hardware. Yes. Now, unfortunately, many states and our federal government have not been too keen to follow that portion of the Constitution, which it's one of many portions of the Constitution that's not being followed today. And it really is shameful that our elected officials do that. But unfortunately, you have voters who are either apathetic to this or even encouraging this type of behavior. Very much so. And yes, I am aware that some of them are gun owners. There are FUDs in this world, and I would like to make a specific address to the FUDs. You know, if you're going to throw, say, Ken under the bus for owning his Uzi, be it, that he is an 80s movie fanatic, or that, maybe this is a personal protection firearm for them or something of that nature, well, you know what? You deserve to have your gun taken away from you. You know, that is the sheer fact. I mean, you guys don't support the Second Amendment. You only support your legal ability to have your sporting equipment, and to hell with everyone else, because you're siding with those very same people who would take Ken's Uzi away from him. And I'm using Ken as a hypothetical one, common 80s name and stuff like that. But, actually, the Uzi does belong to me. But it's just using this as an example. And no, not all FUDs are hunters, and not all hunters are FUDs. I'm very well aware of that too. You do have people who own firearms for other purposes, but then go ahead and support things like Orwellian red flag laws. Not only is that a violation of our Second Amendment, but, it is, quite frankly, a violation of several other amendments, protecting our right to due process, such as our Fourth and Fifth. Moreover, and Sixth, moreover, this goes against one of the principles that free societies have, is that, you're innocent till proven guilty. With red flag laws, they don't even have to name a specific crime you might commit in the future. They just have to, in most cases, I think, with a preponderance of evidence, go to a court where you're not present at, you don't even know what's going on, and then convince the judge, hey, this person may very well be dangerous. We don't know. We don't know what crime this person might commit in the future or anything like that, but we just think he's dangerous. Or it could be a she, too. But the fact of the matter is that this is not a tenet that a free society would have. And quite frankly, I find that disgusting, too. But getting back on to weapons of war. First off, the gun controllers wouldn't know what a weapon of war was if it hit them in the fourth point of contact, I don't think. Furthermore, there are weapons of war that they're not specifically targeting yet, anyway. Things such as this Mosin Nagant, which, by the way, designed by the Russians, used by the Russian army for quite some time. I mean, they started using it, I believe, in the 1890s, used it all the way through World War II. Quite frankly, it's still seeing use even today in warfare. When they talk about our soldiers in Afghanistan getting outranged by, say, Taliban fighters, these Taliban fighters are using stuff like this, or we're using stuff like this to take pot shots at U.S. soldiers from a range. But yet you don't hear the gun controller saying, well, we want to take this. Well, and the reason, obviously, it's pretty obvious. They actually do want to take this, but they just know that, this is probably going to be the thing that they get around to quite later on. However, with most people, they look at it and they don't see any modern army using it. They see the wood furniture on it. It looks really old. And so people don't put two and two together and realize that, hey, this still is, quite frankly, a weapon. And in fact, while we're at it, these same people, this is one, well, this is an NFA Title I compliant version of one of the things that replaced the Mosin Nagant. But I guarantee you some of these same gun controllers are going to be the same people who say, well, the Russians still use, stuff like what this was modeled after. The fact of the matter is the Russian army uses the AK-12 now, which is still an AK platform. It's just an updated version of it. It's chambered in 545 by 39. And there are a few other features on that AK-12 that the original AK platform did not have. I digress. This is a video reacting to the reaction of the gun controllers and going through a lot of their claims and arguments. So I'm going to continue on with this topic, however. What else is a weapon of war? This Garand. Now, this was used by our forces in World War II, the Korean War, and it even saw action in the Vietnam War. That being said, I show this and bring this up because there was a meme floating around. I'm not sure if it was actually Moms Demand Action that did this or somebody, being satirical. But they basically said no civilian needs a weapon of war like the AR-15. They need a hunting rifle like this. So, guys, if it was somebody on our side that did this, just to continue to satirize Moms Demand Action, you need to do a better job of letting everyone know whether or not it was them or that actually said it, or if it's just us, mocking them. Okay? I get that their followers are that stupid. It's obvious. But, we need to be honest. We need our credibility. Unfortunately, we don't have an establishment media, defending us, and pushing our agenda like Moms Demand Action does. So, on to the AR-15. The AR-15, while in many cases does have some similarities to the actual military models, either the M16 or the M4. There are certain differences, and it varies just really depending on which AR-15 you have. Um, like this AR-15 A2 Sporter I have. Yes, it's made by Colt. Yeah, it feeds the same rounds, has the similar barrel composition, well, actually the same barrel composition as the M16 A2, feeds the same magazines and everything like that. There are certain features on here that the M16A2 has that if I were to put onto this rifle, I could be facing up to 10 years in prison, you know. So, with that being said, well, yes, there are a lot of similarities that this has to the M16A2. It's still very much so not the same rifle, and the fact of the matter is that it is a violation of our Second Amendment that this doesn't have the same features that the M16A2 has. This right here, this Colt right here is actually designed with law enforcement in mind, but it's the closest thing I could get to what I carried in service and still fall with under the NFA Title I regulations. So, again, yeah, there are a lot of similarities to this and the M4 I carried, but at the end of the day, they are still two different rifles. And the fact of the matter is, again, if I were to so much as drill a third hole into here, um, yeah, that right there is enough for the ATF to say, oh, it's a readily convertible machine gun. You know, there are other things, by the way, that fall under the AR-15 category that have a lot of differences with what we use in service. In fact, AR-15 enthusiasts would say that this P415 right here does not meet the definition of a true AR-15, specifically because instead of being direct impingement or both operated, as some people would call it, it's short stroke piston. The barrel composition is completely different from the rifle I carried in service. It's a nitride heat treated barrel, not a cold hammer forged stainless steel barrel with chrome lining in it. You know, the fact of the matter is that the restrictions we have in place have not done anything to stop criminals or save lives. All they've done is just violate a constitutionally protected right. This is another one the gun controllers would love to see banned. The fact of the matter is that the actual P90, which this is based off of, it was designed with rear echelon soldiers in mind. It was designed for vehicle crews, truck drivers, things of that nature to have to protect themselves from Russian paratroopers. Um, Nowadays, it seems to be mainly used by bodyguards, personal security details, basically. Um, and it also, same company made this pistol right here to feed the same ammunition as this one right here. So you only have to order one ammunition type for your primary and your sidearm. Pretty cool concept. But for the longest time, this was considered the most controversial pistol in the U.S. The gun controllers specifically targeted this one by name and used all sorts of inflammatory language when talking about this particular gun. They called it a cop killer gun, which it's not. Well, at least not any more than any other gun out there. Let's put it that way. Still, bodyguards, personal security details use both of those items there. Are you telling me that you believe that bodyguards and personal security details, well, I know they're very similar, pretty much the same thing, but are you telling me that their purpose is to kill as many people as possible? Now, I'm going to bet if you're rational and reasonable, you're going to say no. Okay. So, going from that answer right there, why would you think that wouldn't be the case with a private citizen who buys firearms like that? Why wouldn't you extend them that same courtesy saying, hey, maybe they just want something to protect themselves and their family with? They want something very effective to do so. You know, I can't think of any other reason other than, quite frankly, the gun controllers tend to want to be dishonest. I don't think the gun controllers act in good faith, but those of y'all who've seen my channel for any extended period of time already know I believe that. And by the way, I'm going to address the gun controllers' controversy behind the 5.7 pistol. What they're doing basically is taking advantage of people's ignorance of the law and ignorance of firearms, uh, bluntly put, to push their agenda. You see, the 5.7 by 28 millimeter that you get on the commercial market is basically a bottleneck pistol cartridge. Now, for the longest time, bottleneck pistol cartridges didn't really make a splash in the U.S. market up until the 1980s when the 357 SIG was produced. However, the bottleneck pistol cartridges are not a new concept by any stretch of the imagination. Eastern Bloc countries and Russians have been using them for the longest time. This Sava M57 is the Yugoslavian upgrade to the TT-33, which is the Russian pistol, one of Russia's pistols, not the Makarov, obviously, but still, Russians had it as a sidearm for a bit. Now, again, like the Mosin, you'll notice this has got more of an older look to it than, say, most modern pistols. Especially like with, say, the Hammer being as it is. However, this fires a bottleneck pistol cartridge, the 7.62 by 25 Tokarev. Now, again, gun controllers taking advantage of people's ignorance. Yes, bottleneck pistol cartridges do tend to have a higher velocity and a smaller caliber. However, that does not necessarily make them armor piercing. Now, I do understand the original 5.7 by 28, the ones that were planning on issuing to the rear echelon soldiers, were armor piercing. They had the tungsten core and everything like that. They had Russian paratrooper body armor in mind. Those rounds have never been available on the commercial market, though, and actually, they're already illegal. actual armor-piercing rounds for handguns have, to my knowledge, been illegal in the U.S. for quite some time. Gun controllers, however, want to play the semantical game of try to call everything they can armor piercing. If the round punches through armor that wasn't designed to stop that round initially, they call that armor piercing, which that's not what armor piercing is. But again, gun controllers have never let real data and real facts get in the way of some good rhetoric. Now, with that being said, I know I got a little off topic on what the gun controllers are discussing today, but I just want to continue to give you examples about how badly these people act in bad faith, how much ignorance they take advantage of, and just how dishonest these people really are. And I have to bring up historical examples to do this. But with that being said, recently there was actually one of them that sat there and said they needed to microchip everyone's guns so the police could shut them off if they're in an area where they're not supposed to be with the guns. That was actually a proposal by a gun controller. So this goes into the whole smart gun technology. One of the reasons why I don't particularly care for smart guns is because I don't want somebody disabling my firearm when I need it to protect myself. Be it, some hacker or the cops themselves, because there's a mass killing going on and the cops decide they want to disable everyone's guns. And then I have that mass killer there right in front of me. And I know I'm using an example, by the way, a statistical outlier example, but that mass killer is right in front of me. And all of a sudden, my gun doesn't work, but their gun does because they either A, took the fucking chip out, B, never had the chip in there to begin with. That is one of those reasons why I'm against that technology. It doesn't even have to be a mass killer. It could be an armed robbery going on, and cops decide, hey, while that alarm switched, let's go ahead and disable everyone's guns. Well, it turns out the armed robber, probably thought 10 steps ahead of this and is using a gun without a microchip, or has figured out a way to block that signal to their gun's microchip. And again, in previous videos, I have discussed smart gun technology and why it's a bad idea. The easiest way to tell, by the way, it is a bad idea is that no police department is putting up a grant for it. None of the police departments are pulling their money together and saying, hey, look, our officers need smart guns because they're oftentimes alone in close contact with suspects they're trying to arrest, and they run the risk of suspects taking their guns off of them. You don't see that. You see no army in the world saying, hey, you know what? Our soldiers are engaged in close combat with the enemy. We want to be able to have a chip we can implant in each and every one of our soldiers that's matched up to all the weapons, so that way only our soldiers can operate the weapons that are in our inventory. You don't see any of that. And let's be frank, if this technology was all that promising, the U.S. Army would spend that type of money on something of that nature. The U.S. Army is notorious for spending money on stuff, and that would include weapons and technology. And the fact that our Army is not putting forth any grant for any sort of thing like that should be very telling. It really should be very telling that our Army is not investing in this technology that that sounds great on paper, but in practice sucks. Now let's talk about universal background checks. All right, so let's start off with our current background check system. That was started with the 93 Brady Bill. And what that basically requires is that if you have an FFL, you're in the business of selling firearms for a living, you have to conduct a background check every time a firearm gets transferred from your inventory to a private citizen. That private citizen has to fill out a 4473 form, which is partial registration. It's not full registration, but still, yeah, the rationale was, well, we just need to have this because people who are prohibited, from owning a firearm might just simply ignore that law and walk into a gun store and buy one anyway. So we need those background checks in place, so that way we can catch them doing this. Well, now what they're talking about doing is they're saying, well, since, criminals are still getting guns illegally, ignoring gun laws. I know, I'm shocked too. I didn't think criminals broke any laws either. But, yeah, apparently people are going in and managing to find a way to get their hands on firearms, even if they are prohibited. At least some of them are. Yeah, I know. It's still a surprise that criminals don't follow the laws. But yeah, so now what they want to do with universal background checks, presumably, is make it so whenever Johnny decides to sell a firearm to his friend Joe, they want them to go in to an FFL, get a background check conducted, and have a 4473 form filled out. Guys, if you don't realize what that does right there, um, then I can't help you. I mean, gun controllers want it because it's one more step closer to making that 4473 form a full registration. And it is something to make owning firearms and trading firearms to friends and family, people and, know probably aren't prohibited, all that more onerous and costly. It's a way to take money and time out of their pocket and actually get us closer to having a backdoor registration, which, again, if you don't understand why we don't want registration, you haven't been paying attention to this debate very well, and you haven't paid attention to history very well. Gun controllers want registration because they know that while their agenda might not be popular right now, in certain respects, or at least an outright ban on some or all firearms might not be popular right now, um, they know that, there might be a time where it is, and thus, once they can get that pushed through, that ban on even just certain types of firearms pushed through, they already have the list ready to go. They know who has them according to that list. That means anybody who's been following the law, well, sorry, but you have something that's now illegal. You have to turn it in or risk prison time. You know? So, why we don't registration? One of the many reasons as to why I'm opposed to this whole universal background check thing. Now, gun controllers will tell you that 90% of Americans support that. They base it off of one particular poll, I believe, which is really, by the way, faulty. One, I think a lot of the people answering that question don't really know what they're answering. I think they're talking about the background check system that's currently in place. And second, if 90% of Americans supported anything or agreed on anything, you have a constitutional amendment by now. You don't. There's a reason you don't. Probably because 90% of Americans really don't support that. And that's not the only problem with polling. Problem with polling is another problem with polling is that you'll have people who don't really care one way or the other. I mean, they don't have an answer, that says, I just really don't care. And so they're going to put one answer or another. And that's another problem with polling. How you word the question makes all the difference too sometimes. Do you support stronger gun laws to save the lives of children, or the lives of children so important that you would not support any stronger gun laws? Yeah, I guarantee you're going to get a higher percentage of people who think, well, sure, if gun laws work, I'll support them, and they'll check the stronger gun law thing, the more restrictive gun law option, just simply because they don't want to seem like a heartless bastard. Another such problem with polling is that sometimes people just don't know enough about the topic to give good answers. You know, would you have somebody, put their 2 cents in on aircraft design if they don't know the difference between a rotary wing aircraft and a fixed wing aircraft? I wouldn't think you would if your IQ exceeds room temperature. Especially if you're going to be the one flying on that aircraft. So, yeah, there are all sorts of problems with polling. That's why, whenever the gun controllers bring up the next cooked poll, that they're putting out there, I take it with a grain of salt. So I've continued going on about this for a bit. I know I'm going to have to edit a lot of the getting off topic out of this, but I'm going to wrap this up here. And I'm going to say simply, folks, we should not let tragedies be exploited to take our freedom. That's not right. You rarely do get those freedoms back, and let's face facts. I mean, especially with this freedom, it's usually numero uno for tyrants to go after if it's a freedom that the people still have of that country. If the previous regimes haven't just already destroyed that particular freedom. There's a reason why firearm ownership isn't quite as prevalent and isn't quite so free in other countries as it is in the U.S. And that is because most governments want to make sure their people are really disarmed, dependent on the government for their protection. And they want to make sure that there's less of a chance that they're going to get checked if they do something really bad. The reason why the Anti-Federalist wrote the Bill of Rights and wanted the Bill of Rights to be included in the Constitution is because they weren't trusting of the government then, and they were helping to form it. That should tell you something. That should tell you that maybe our freedoms are worth protecting. They are worth having. Even if you think those freedoms are the cause of certain problems we have in this country. However, unfortunately, we're getting more and more to the point to where we're just too eager to surrender our freedoms, on the proviso that will supposedly make us more safe. But let's take, for example, what happened in Uvalde here last week. Well, it does look an awful lot like the police did a lot of standing around. They weren't quite so quick to go in there and deal with that active shooter. And quite frankly, I don't know why anybody else or why very few other people see this, it seems, but these mass killings, they don't make the case for you to give up your freedom to have firearms. They make the case for you to actually be armed yourself. You know, because I know for the longest time, gun controllers said, well, why do you need a gun for? Personal protection. The police will be there. Well, clearly, with these mass shootings, they're not. They're not there. And clearly they're going to put, well, at least certain departments are going to put the lives of their officers above the lives of the people they supposedly are there to protect. You know, and I'm not, again, saying that this is all police officers or that there was not a single police officer there that didn't want to go in. But what I am saying is that you shouldn't sit there and trust that the police are going to be there all the time to protect you. And I don't know why people still have that belief. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Y'all take it easy. And the comment section is down there for you guys to put your opinion in there too. So y'all have a great day now.